Hi everyone, this is Cecil again, and on today's Yellowstone podcast, I'm going to be telling you about the best places in Yellowstone to photograph sunrise and sunset. As is so often the case, if you are listening to this on Spotify or Google Podcasts or wherever, I do suggest that you go to YouTube. You'll find it easier to follow along with the maps and photographs and video that I'm going to be showing you. Go to YouTube, search for best places to photograph Yellowstone sunsets, and hopefully it brings up this podcast. What we're looking at the moment is a map of the figure of eight, the roads that run through Yellowstone, and I want to get the obvious one out of the way first, and that is Mount Washburn. Yes, Mount Washburn, the highest accessible place in Yellowstone National Park, and if you hike up or climb up to the top of Mount Washburn, I imagine that you're going to get a good view of sunsets and sunrises, whichever way you look. Having said that, let us now consider what makes sunrises and sunsets at Yellowstone so special compared to basically almost anywhere else in the world. Like so many of America's national parks, Yellowstone has got incredible beauty. It's beautiful, but it's not unique for that. It also has wildlife, but we'll find wildlife at others of the national parks. What really sets Yellowstone apart are its thermal features. The geysers, the hot springs, the mud pots, and the fumaroles, and the steam that you see billowing off in these huge clouds. So my suggestion to you is that if you do want to take advantage of your time in Yellowstone and get a really great sunrise or sunset pic, try and find somewhere where the sun is setting or rising behind those gigantic clouds of steam. And this is what I'm going to be focusing on mainly in this podcast. One challenge that we do have here in Yellowstone is that there's mountains everywhere. And to illustrate what I mean, I've brought up an aviation map because it was the easiest way I could show you how high the mountains are. I'm tracing out the figure of eight, the roads that run through Yellowstone. And if you look at these figures, 11,300, 12,600, 12,500, basically, if you subtract 500 feet from each of those, so 12,100, 10,800, that'll tell you the heights of the various mountains that completely surround Yellowstone. And for that reason, it can be a challenge to get a pure, great sunrise picture or sunset picture where the sun is disappearing over the horizon, or for that matter, rising over the horizon. But there are some possibilities. The first one that I would like to look at is going to be West Thumb Geyser Basin. This, as many of you will know, is one of my favorite places in all of Yellowstone National Park. It is such an incredibly beautiful geyser basin, and when our tours, and we run tours from West Yellowstone, which you can see at yellowstonetours.net, that's yellowstonetours.net, we generally get to West Thumb just after sunrise and look at that beautiful Yellowstone Lake. This is Fishing Cone Geyser in the foreground. The sun obviously had risen, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes, an hour beforehand, so we weren't there truly at sunrise, but it'll give you an idea. Here's another one that was shot at more or less sunrise at West Thumb Geyser Basin. So let's consider why why West Thumb Geyser Basin is such a great place to photograph sunrises. If you look at the map, you'll see that it's open over the water all the way as far as the Absaroka Mountains. So you have a decent chance of getting a really good sunrise picture here, in fact anywhere along the shores of Yellowstone Lake, because it faces to the east. So that is one place that I would recommend. Another place, if you're on the lower loop, so in other words, if you're staying at West Yellowstone, somewhere around over here on the map is the Mary Mountain Trail. And there is a gap in the mountains. So here's Mary Lake, so Mary Mountain Trail is probably over here somewhere, and there is a gap in the mountains. So when you're facing east, you will see to some extent the sun pretty soon after it has risen. Having said that, it's a little difficult for many of us, including me, to get up that early in the morning. So why don't we talk about sunsets instead? I mentioned before that the problem that you have in Yellowstone is that we're completely surrounded by mountains. On the west side of Yellowstone, we've got the Gallatin Mountain range running from south to north, and on the east side there's the Absaroka Mountains also running south-north or north-south. So this does limit the places where you can get good sunset photographs. I got a pretty good sequence at Old Faithful. It's a little surprising that you can get a good sunset picture here because there is this small hill that is kind of behind Old Faithful when the sun is going down. But if Old Faithful erupts at the right time, you can get a spectacular photograph of Old Faithful. But this is one of the problems around most of these geyser basins if we're looking at the map. This area over here, and I'm showing you to the west of the Upper Geyser Basin and to the west of Black Sand Basin and Biscuit Basin and Midway Geyser Basin, that area over there has got a series of hills that run along, so you can't get a true sunset picture. You can't get a true great sunset picture. However, by the time we get to the Lower Geyser Basin, this is where there are opportunities. And this is what we call a virtual Yellowstone tour that I'm showing you on our YouTube channel at the moment. This was taken last year, just after Yellowstone opened. I happened to be driving past the Lower Geyser Basin, and although it was cloudy, there's almost always is going to be a gap between the clouds and the horizon, and I was lucky enough to be passing there when that happened. And just look at those billowing clouds of steam. And this illustrates my point. If you can get the sun setting, or for that matter the sunrise, but it's more likely to be the setting sun behind these billows of steam, these clouds of steam, as you can see, the opportunities are really amazing. And what we're looking at there is steam coming off Clepsydra Geyser. And Clepsydra Geyser at the Lower Geyser Basin is almost always erupting. So those are the paint pots at the Lower Geyser Basin. So to give you an idea, if you pass the paint pots, and they're going to be on your right, and then you carry on walking straight, you're going to come to Clepsydra. In addition to Clepsydra, there's various other thermal features there as well, which are often giving off water or giving off steam. And that would be my number one place in all of Yellowstone to photograph sunsets. You have to be patient, wait for the sun to go down, but you don't, unlike Old Faithful, have to wait for a geyser to erupt, because Clepsydra is inevitably going to be erupting. What I'd like to show you now is somewhere else in the same vicinity where you can also get a great sunset picture. If we look at where the Lower Geyser Basin is, and I think that I'm going to try and find it, here it is, on Google Maps. That is the Lower Geyser Basin. Just behind the Lower Geyser Basin, just to the east of the Lower Geyser Basin, is Firehole Lake Drive. And this area here, from east to west, from right to left, also doesn't have any hills in the way. So if you are lucky enough to be able to be there when Great Fountain geysers erupting or White Dome geysers erupting, you've got these fields that run all the way from Great Fountain past White Dome to the Lower Geyser Basin to that open area behind it. So the potential in that area as well is enormous for great sunset pictures. And this is called Firehole Lake Drive. It is one way, so you'll have to come to the south and then take it. I would wait probably somewhere around White Dome unless Great Fountain is predicted to erupt. White Dome used to erupt every 15 to 20 minutes. It's now like more every, I don't know, hour and a quarter or so. But still, and then there's also steam coming off in this area here around the parking lot near Firehole Lake itself. So that is something else that you could look at. Having said that, there are opportunities all over Yellowstone to get great sunrise or sunset pictures. This picture that I'm showing you here was shot by a friend of mine, Cindy Schaefer, at Madison Junction. So you wouldn't normally expect to get great sunset pictures at Madison Junction because of all the mountains in the way. But Cindy got that picture there. In addition, I happened to be on Facebook and I came across this picture by Kristen Brown, which was shot in almost the same location. Look at that. She's got the sun going down behind those mountains, and she's made just the most incredible picture with the National Park mountain sign in the foreground. In addition, if we look at some of Cindy's pictures, she shot these at sunrise, also in the Madison Junction area, but she got up really early. So many of you will probably know this, but at sunrise and sunset, only the longest rays of the sun penetrate through to the earth. And those longest rays are the reds and the oranges and the yellows. So no matter where you are in the park, if you're up early enough, you can get the sort of pictures that Cindy got over here. Isn't that magnificent? Look at the steam coming out of the bison's mouth, and then she's got the thermal features in the background. Cindy, by the way, is really helpful. You can find her on Facebook. She also works at our local visitor center here at West Yellowstone. As I say, she's extraordinarily helpful, and she really is an absolute fountain of information. The next area that I would like to show you is if you are driving home, you're staying in West Yellowstone and you're driving home from Madison Junction to West Yellowstone, there's a stretch of road right over here where the Madison River is just to the north of the road between Madison Junction and West Yellowstone. And you'll have to excuse me, I have got so many windows and maps open. Okay, here's one. I was driving home and I came across this. There were clouds, but once again, there was a gap in the clouds. This is the Madison River. Those are the Gallatin Mountains in the background. And that also made a surprisingly good photograph as well. There's another version of that. One other area that I would like to show you is in West Yellowstone itself. And let me just zoom out. It's what we call the old airport. So if you're staying in West Yellowstone, obviously the sun is going to set to the west. And we get the most wonderful sunsets in this area here. Google calls it the Railroad Summer Home area. It's where the airport used to be. So this is the western edge of West Yellowstone. And I have got some great pictures there. Okay, so these were the ones at the lower Geyser Basin that I'd mentioned to you before. But if I just scroll down a bit, okay, so these were actually shot from our motel. You can see our motel at ysmotel.com. That's YS, short for Yellowstone, ysmotel.com. But I was standing outside our motel, which isn't too far from that area that I mentioned to you. And we get the most spectacular sunsets. And just standing outside there, the opportunities are really endless. That is Sawtell Peak in the background. Guys, those are my suggestions for the best places to photograph sunset or sunrise in Yellowstone. If you have any that you think are better or that you think should be included in a future podcast, don't hesitate to let me know. Just make a note in the comments section at the bottom on the YouTube video. Otherwise, thank you for joining me on this Yellowstone podcast. Remember, if you're looking for a motel in the Yellowstone area, we have a great motel in West Yellowstone, which you can see at ysmotel.com. yellowstonemotel.com. If you're looking for a Yellowstone tour, we operate more Yellowstone tours literally than anyone in the world. You can see them at yellowstonetours.net. A couple of our other services, we also offer short day hikes in Yellowstone, anywhere from 2 hours to a day. Check those out, please, at yellowstonedayhikes.com. And if you're looking for bear spray rentals in Yellowstone, we also offer those at yellowstonebearsprayrentals.com. yellowstonebearsprayrentals.com. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Yellowstone podcast.